It was a crisp autumn morning in rural Pennsylvania when the news broke. A young girl had been found in the woods, her life taken violently, her story buried under layers of mystery. The town, a quiet community where everyone knew each other, was shaken to its core. Questions swirled. Who could do such a thing? Why her? And most chilling of all, would the truth ever come to light? Tonight, we dive deep into a case that has haunted investigators for decades. A girl lost too soon, a community scarred forever, and a mystery that refuses to die. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about safety, trust, and the shadows that lurk just beyond the trees. Before we begin, imagine walking alone through the woods you grew up playing in, the same woods where childhood games and laughter once filled the air. Now imagine that same forest turning into a trap, a place where a young life could vanish without a trace. This is the story of Emily Lawson, a 16-year-old girl whose disappearance in 1998 stunned her small Pennsylvania town and captivated a nation. Emily was more than just a victim. She was a daughter, a friend, a promising student, and a vibrant soul whose life was stolen in a way that left questions the police could never fully answer. Over the next 3 episodes, we will explore every known detail, every witness account, every chilling twist, and the shocking clues that were discovered in the aftermath. But beware, this story is not just about the crime. It's about the people left behind, the secrets that may still be hidden in the woods, and the haunting truth that Emily's story has never been fully told. Before we dive deeper, if you care about seeking justice for the victims and uncovering the truths that some want to remain buried, consider subscribing. Hit the bell so you never miss a story that uncovers the untold and keeps the memory of those lost alive. Emily Lawson was known for her smile, a smile that could brighten even the gloomiest autumn morning. She was the kind of girl who volunteered at the local animal shelter, stayed late at the library helping classmates with homework, and had a circle of friends who adored her for her kindness and humor. Her parents, Mark and Susan Lawson, were proud of the daughter they described as full of light, never imagining that the very community they trusted would soon become the backdrop of an unspeakable tragedy. On the evening of October 14th, 1998, Emily had spent the day preparing for the school's annual fall festival. She called her mother to confirm the details of her costume and promised to return home by dusk. But when the night fell, Emily never returned. Her friends thought she might have stayed late at the festival. Her parents initially feared she had wandered into the woods behind their property, a place she often explored during the day. But as darkness settled over the town, the fear that something was wrong grew heavier and more suffocating. Mark and Susan called the police around 8:30 p.m., their voices trembling, describing Emily's last known movements and her radiant personality. The local sheriff, though experienced, was unprepared for the horror that was about to unfold. Search parties formed immediately, volunteers flooding the streets, flashlights cutting through the dense canopy of the forest. Every minute that passed made the fear unbearable. Max, Emily's loyal golden retriever, had been with her that day. Witnesses later said he ran back to the Lawson home as the search began, barking frantically and refusing to be calmed. It was as if he understood instinctively that his companion was in grave danger. While the town organized the search on foot, Max led his owners toward a trail he had followed earlier, stopping at a small clearing near the edge of the forest, a place where sunlight rarely reached the forest floor. Hours later, at 11:45 p.m., Emily's body was discovered. She lay partially hidden under a thick blanket of leaves, a victim of a violent crime that left investigators scrambling. The small town, once tranquil and safe, became a place of shock, grief, and suspicion. How could such a thing happen here? Who could commit such a heinous act against a young girl known for nothing but her kindness? The coroner's report was grim. Emily had been attacked and killed hours before she was found, her life stolen in a way that suggested both planning and cruelty. Yet, despite the evidence collected, the case soon became a nightmare for law enforcement. No fingerprints were found that could identify a suspect. No witnesses came forward. No motive was apparent. Emily Lawson's murder became a cold case almost immediately, leaving her family and the town with more questions than answers. As investigators combed the woods and interviewed friends, a troubling picture began to emerge. Emily had recently received strange phone calls at home, which she had mentioned casually to her friends, but never reported. The numbers were untraceable, the callers anonymous. Some believed it was nothing more than prank calls, but in hindsight, they might have been far more sinister. And then there were the tracks, footprints found near the clearing where Emily was discovered, leading investigators to believe someone had been lying in wait for her. The question that haunted everyone was, why Emily? Why here? Why her? Her parents, devastated, refused to give up hope. Community vigils were held, candles flickering in the cold autumn air, as residents tried to comfort one another and demand answers. Yet, even as the town mourned, fear began to grow. Parents were no longer sending their children out alone, friends whispered about strangers in the woods, and the once trusted forest became a place of dread. Emily's disappearance and tragic death would soon reach beyond the borders of Pennsylvania. The story of the girl in the woods captivated national attention. Her case covered by local and national media, her photograph appearing on newsstands and television screens across the country. People couldn't stop asking the same question: who could commit such a crime and vanish without a trace? Even decades later, the answers remain elusive. But buried within the details of that night, the overlooked clues, the whispers of witnesses too afraid to speak, and the mysterious phone calls Emily received, are secrets that might one day reveal the truth. And some of these secrets would come to light in ways that would shock everyone, including Emily's closest friends and family. As the town of Cedarwood wrestled with grief and confusion, a young detective named Ryan Matthews took the case personally. New to the area and eager to prove himself, he vowed that he would not rest until Emily's killer was found. Little did he know, this case would test his every skill, force him to confront the darkest corners of human nature, and lead him to a discovery that would change everything he thought he knew about Emily's final hours. And that discovery would shock the town in ways no one could have imagined. There was a clue, a piece of evidence, something overlooked in the chaos of that fateful night that would point toward the identity of someone very close to Emily's world, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. But before Detective Matthews could act, events unfolded that would push the case, and the town, into even deeper uncertainty, leaving the biggest questions unanswered and the darkest secrets still hidden in the shadows of the woods. Emily's murder seemed unsolvable, but Detective Matthews had stumbled upon a tiny detail that could unravel everything. A detail that could point to the killer, if only he could interpret it correctly. And the most shocking part, someone in Emily's life knew more than they were letting on. The morning after Emily's body was discovered, Cedarwood was shrouded in silence. News crews had arrived from neighboring towns, and the media frenzy had already begun. Local residents whispered about the tragedy in hushed voices, each shadowy tree in the forest reminding them of Emily's last moments. For Mark and Susan Lawson, every hour felt like a lifetime. Their world had been turned upside down, and the investigation that followed would pull them into a spiral of fear, frustration, and despair that would test every ounce of their resilience. Detective Ryan Matthews, a young but dedicated officer, had quickly taken charge of the case. He was meticulous, driven not by ambition, but by a profound sense of justice. The case of Emily Lawson was more than a headline, it was a personal mission. As he reviewed the evidence from a crime scene, he noticed anomalies that others had dismissed. A faint set of footprints near the clearing, slightly muddied, and leading into dense underbrush. A torn piece of fabric that didn't match Emily's clothing, and the subtle signs of a struggle that suggested Emily had tried to fight back against her attacker. Each clue was a whisper in the silence, hinting at a story no one had yet pieced together. The police conducted countless interviews with Emily's friends, teachers, and neighbors. Patterns began to emerge, though none of them pointed clearly toward a suspect. Some friends mentioned that Emily had received strange phone calls in the weeks leading up to her death, calls she had shrugged off, thinking they were harmless pranks. Others noted a man who had been seen near the school several times, always lingering in the background watching. The descriptions were vague, and no one seemed able to recall definitive details. But for Detective Matthews, these threads were enough to begin weaving a pattern, even if it was still incomplete. Meanwhile, Emily's parents struggled with unimaginable grief. Susan Lawson spent hours in Emily's room, clutching her daughter's belongings, her mind replaying every moment they had shared. She wondered endlessly whether there had been warning signs she missed, or if Emily had tried to tell her something without realizing herself. Mark, on the other hand, threw himself into the investigation, attending every briefing, poring over evidence, and speaking with law enforcement late into the night. The couple's pain was palpable, a rawness that gripped anyone who met them. And yet, they were determined, not just to mourn, but to see justice done for Emily. The first break in the case came when Detective Matthews received a tip from an anonymous caller. The voice on the other end was shaky, almost fearful, but it provided a critical detail. Someone had been lurking near the woods the evening Emily disappeared, someone who had been seen leaving the area in a hurry. The description was vague, but it was enough to narrow down potential suspects. Matthews felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was the lead that would finally pierce the darkness surrounding Emily's death. As the investigation unfolded, the small town of Cedarwood began to feel the weight of fear in a new way. Parents walked their children to school, neighbors watched one another with suspicion, and the woods where Emily had been found transformed from a place of childhood play to a symbol of danger. Rumors spread quickly, fueled by fear and grief. Some suggested it was a stranger passing through, others whispered about someone closer to home. Every possibility seemed plausible, and yet none of them brought closure. Detective Matthews, however, remained relentless. He discovered that the phone calls Emily had received came from untraceable numbers, likely using a burner phone. This suggested planning, intent, and a chilling level of premeditation. Someone had been watching Emily, observing her routines, waiting for the perfect moment. It was a terrifying realization. The person responsible for her death was patient, calculating, and possibly still in the community. Weeks passed, and yet the investigation seemed stalled. No arrests had been made, and Emily's murder continued to haunt the town. The media attention intensified, turning Cedarwood into a spotlighted crime scene. Every news segment reminded residents of the tragedy, fueling their fear and grief. But amidst the frustration and heartbreak, Detective Matthews refused to give up. He revisited the crime scene repeatedly, poring over every photograph, every scrap of evidence, and every witness statement, hoping that some overlooked detail would finally point toward the killer. Then, just when the case seemed at a standstill, a new piece of evidence surfaced. A local hunter, exploring the woods near the original crime scene, discovered a small, weathered notebook partially buried under leaves. Its pages contained cryptic notes, numbers, and references that no one could immediately decipher. Detective Matthews examined it closely, suspecting that it might belong to the perpetrator. Could this notebook contain the key to unraveling the mystery? And more importantly, why had it been left so close to where Emily had been found? The discovery of the notebook brought new energy to the investigation, but it also raised disturbing questions. If someone had planned Emily's murder, why leave this clue behind? Was it a mistake, or was it intentional, a message meant to taunt the investigators? Matthews knew that every detail mattered, but the deeper he dug, the more complex the case became. There were layers of deception, hidden motives, and secrets buried beneath the surface of Cedarwood's seemingly idyllic streets. Meanwhile, Emily's friends began to share stories they hadn't previously mentioned. One friend recalled seeing a man at the festival Emily had attended the night she vanished. He seemed out of place, lingering on the edges, watching Emily as she laughed with her friends. Another remembered Emily expressing discomfort about someone following her home weeks before the tragedy. These seemingly minor details painted a picture of a predator who had been patient, methodical, and terrifyingly close. Through it all, Emily's parents clung to hope, finding strength in their memories of their daughter. Susan Lawson often spoke publicly, urging the town to remember Emily not just as a victim, but as the vibrant, compassionate young woman she had been. Her words inspired the community, bringing neighbors together to search, support, and stay vigilant. In a subtle yet powerful way, these moments of unity reminded viewers of the importance of community and vigilance, a message that could encourage engagement, sharing, and even subscriptions to follow the case as it unfolded. Despite these breakthroughs, the killer remained elusive. Every lead seemed to evaporate, every suspect was cleared, and the notebook offered tantalizing clues that only deepened the mystery. Detective Matthews began to suspect that the key to solving Emily's murder might not lie in obvious evidence, but in understanding the relationships, the secrets, and the hidden tensions in her life. Someone close to Emily may have known more than they were willing to admit. And then came the most shocking revelation yet. A security camera from a nearby gas station, previously overlooked, had captured a figure leaving the area near the woods the night Emily disappeared. The footage was grainy, the details faint, but it showed someone moving with purpose, avoiding the main roads, and carrying what appeared to be a large bag. This was the first visual evidence of the killer, yet it raised even more questions. Who was this person and what was in the bag? More importantly, how could they have vanished without a trace, leaving Emily's family and the town desperate for answers? Detective Matthews knew that the next step would be critical. Every moment brought him closer to understanding the killer's identity, but also deeper into danger and uncertainty. And lurking in the shadows was a truth that would shock not only the investigators but the community itself, something that could change everything they thought they knew about Emily, the night she died, and the person responsible. As Matthews prepared to confront his latest lead, he uncovered a secret connection between Emily and someone she trusted deeply, someone who had been near the woods that night. Could the killer have been hiding in plain sight all along? And what was the shocking truth the notebook held? A truth that could finally reveal the identity of the person who ended Emily's life. Detective Ryan Matthews had been working the Emily Lawson case tirelessly for months. Every lead, every witness, every cryptic note from a mysterious notebook had been dissected and examined, yet the identity of her killer remained frustratingly elusive. The town of Cedarwood had moved into a strange limbo, grieving, fearful, and deeply unsettled by the thought that someone capable of such horror had been living among them, undetected, possibly still walking their streets. Then, one rainy afternoon, Matthews received a phone call that would shift the case in a dramatic new direction. An old friend of Emily's, someone who had remained largely quiet during the investigation, came forward with a revelation she had been too afraid to share. It was a message Emily had sent via an anonymous letter just days before her death, one that suggested she had seen something or someone that made her feel unsafe. The friend handed over the letter, trembling, as if merely touching it might summon the darkness Emily had faced. The letter, though short and carefully written, hinted at a secret someone was hiding, a detail that Emily had stumbled upon without realizing its gravity. Detective Matthews studied it closely. There was a reference to a location deep in the woods, near the clearing where Emily had been discovered, along with a name, a person Emily had trusted, someone close to her daily life. Matthews felt a chill. Could this be the breakthrough he had been waiting for? Could someone in Emily's circle have been involved, or at least have known more than they admitted? As Matthews revisited the crime scene with fresh eyes, he noticed something that had been overlooked, faint markings on the trees near the clearing, almost like symbols carved in haste. At first, they seemed meaningless, perhaps random scratches left by a hiker. But when compared to the cryptic notebook found earlier, a pattern began to emerge. The symbols corresponded to the numbers and letters in the notebook, suggesting the killer had been meticulous, leaving a trail that only someone paying close attention could decipher. The realization sent a shiver down Matthew's spine. Emily's killer had been clever, careful, and terrifyingly patient. Meanwhile, the town of Cedarwood grappled with a mix of relief and renewed fear. Parents kept their children closer, neighbors watched one another with suspicion, and Emily's parents lived in a constant state of anxiety, torn between hope for justice and fear of another tragedy. Susan Lawson, in particular, became a quiet pillar of strength, speaking at vigils and community events, urging residents to remember Emily for her life and the love she brought, not just the tragedy that had ended it. Her words resonated, inspiring the community to stay vigilant and support one another, a subtle yet powerful call to action that could also encourage viewers to engage with the story, follow updates, and honor the memory of victims. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Surveillance footage from a convenience store near the edge of town, previously disregarded, revealed a figure acting nervously, carrying a bag consistent with the size and shape described in witness accounts. But what truly shocked Matthews was the figure's gait, the way they moved, the hesitation, the subtle familiarity with the terrain. Matthews cross-referenced this with friends' testimonies and the letter Emily had written. Suddenly, the pieces began to form a chilling picture. The killer was not a stranger passing through, but someone who had been close enough to observe Emily's routines, patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. As Matthews dug deeper, he uncovered a history of interactions between Emily and this individual, innocuous at first glance, but in hindsight, increasingly concerning. Small incidents, fleeting glimpses of the person lurking near her school, unexplained phone calls, and subtle intimidation all painted the portrait of someone obsessive, dangerous, and manipulative. Matthews realized that Emily's instincts, the unease she expressed in the days before her death, were tragically accurate. She had sensed danger that those around her had dismissed. The investigation now focused intensely on this individual, whose identity, for legal reasons, cannot be fully disclosed here. What Matthews discovered was shocking. The killer had not only targeted Emily, but had taken painstaking measures to cover their tracks, exploiting every loophole, every moment of distraction, and every shadow in the town to evade detection. And yet, in their arrogance, they had left clues, a notebook, carvings, and a series of small but significant errors that, when pieced together, could finally lead to justice. Despite the mounting evidence, Matthews knew this would not be easy. The suspect was careful, calculating, and deeply embedded in the community. Any misstep could mean losing the chance for justice forever. The tension in Cedarwood reached its peak as law enforcement prepared for a confrontation that could bring answers decades in the making, or leave the town reeling from another shocking twist. In the midst of this, the emotional toll on Emily's family was immense. Mark and Susan Lawson were caught between fear and hope, their grief now interwoven with a cautious optimism. They clung to the belief that Emily's story could finally be resolved, that the secrets hidden in the woods would not remain buried forever. Each day brought new revelations, each clue a testament to their daughter's life, courage, and the resilience of a community unwilling to forget her. And then, in a tense late-night operation, law enforcement moved in on the suspect's location. Matthews watched as officers approached, hearts pounding, flashlights cutting through the darkness like knives. Inside, evidence was found that corroborated nearly every theory the investigators had pieced together over months of painstaking work. The notebook, the carvings, the surveillance footage, all pointed unmistakably to one person. The truth, long hidden in shadows, was finally beginning to emerge. Yet even as the suspect was taken into custody, questions lingered. Why had this individual targeted Emily? What had driven them to commit such a cruel act? And perhaps most hauntingly, were there details that even Matthews had not uncovered, secrets that could forever remain buried in the woods where Emily had lost her life? The answers, it seemed, were only partially revealed, leaving the community to grapple with both closure and the unsettling reality that evil can often hide in plain sight. Emily Lawson's story, though tragic, became a catalyst for change in Cedarwood. Awareness programs, safety measures, and community vigilance all intensified in the wake of the tragedy. Her parents, while forever scarred by the loss, transformed their grief into advocacy, working with law enforcement and local schools to educate young people about the dangers that can lurk even in familiar places. In a subtle yet profound way, the story of Emily's life and the bravery of those seeking justice inspired others to act, to remain vigilant, and to remember the importance of compassion and courage. Though the suspect was in custody, Detective Matthews knew the story wasn't fully over. There were still unanswered questions, details Emily had discovered, secrets only she had known, and shadows in the woods that no one could explain. And as the town slowly began to heal, the haunting truth lingered. Some mysteries never fully leave us, and some lies, like Emily's, leave a mark that time cannot erase. As you reflect on Emily's story, her courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice, remember that awareness, vigilance, and community matter more than ever. And if you feel compelled to honor her memory, share this story, subscribe, and join us in remembering those whose voices were taken too soon.